Welcome to the Friends of Fantasy Benefits Baseball Podcast. I'm Justin Mason, lead fantasy writer and analyst of Friends of Fantasy Benefits.com. Join me on this episode, as always, is Dave McDonald. Dave, how you doing, my friend?
Doing good, buddy. Doing good. Just watching Brett Maher miss all of the extra points tonight in this playoff game. So that's been interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I know they moved the extra points back, but it's getting ridiculous.
Oh for 4, unreal.
Oh, I didn't even know he missed a fourth one.
He missed the fourth one.
Last I saw, he had just missed 3, and then I walked out the office to get ready for this. So we are recording on Monday the 16th, so this episode won't be up until Wednesday the 18th. So if anything happens from the Mets between now and then, I apologize. We'll catch up on all the old moves and things like that once we start recording regular episodes here in February. But joining us today is Chris Lopes of Ball 5 Pod. Chris, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thank you for having me. And you know, I hope something does happen for the Mets' sake. Hopefully it's not a whole other Carlos Correa situation, as I'm sure you are very privy to, close to the heart there. But hopefully something happens. So
yeah, you and I can commiserate a little bit, considering we both thought we were getting Carlos Correa for our respective teams. Dave, being a Guardians fan, he's just happy with Josh Bell at this point.
Do you want to bet that you're going to both be happy that you
I'm actually stoked. Yeah,
the contract is going to look horrible.
Yeah. It may look horrible a lot sooner than 10 years down the road.
Much sooner. Yeah, probably this year. I mean, how many? He failed 2 physicals, and we're just like, oh yeah, he's obviously fine.
Yeah.
It would be markedly hilarious if if he does get an ankle injury. I never want to wish an ankle injury on someone, but it would be pretty funny, right? Like, objectively, it would be funny.
I would just like to point out that was Chris who said that, not me. I don't want to get the hate mail about Dave wishing injuries upon anyone. That was Chris Lopes, not Dave McDonald.
Yeah, my introduction to the scene.
Chris, why don't you remind everybody where you can reach us on social media and then talk about what you do?
Yeah, so please, you can get us at Ball 5 Pod. That's 5 spelt out. Or if you're looking for my my personal, you can get me at Lopesy_16 there. And yeah, so me and my brother do a podcast called Ball 5 Podcast. We're on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. And we really do general baseball news and just some fun stuff, some fun banter. We try to be funny, so hopefully there's that. But most of the time we just try to cover the news and get that out to y'all. So
yeah, Dave and I don't try to be funny. We're not very good at that portion of things. So if you're looking for funny, definitely go over to Ball 5 Pod as opposed to sticking around here.
Yeah.
All right, let's you can reach Dave on Twitter at RunDMC D. Don't forget the D. And you can follow me on Twitter at Justin Mason FWFB. Give us a 5-star review. Really helps us out, and I really appreciate the amount of 5-star reviews we've gotten this month. I was just telling the guys before we started, we've had 19 new 5-star reviews between Apple and Spotify this month, and
only 7 of them were Justin doing it from other people's phones.
Yes, this is true. That's actually something I was telling them I used to do back when I first started to get 5-star reviews, and it worked. So if you're new in the podcasting game, steal your friends' phones. But we'll definitely go through them at some point and kind of read them out and things like that. But just want to say thank you to everyone. Keep getting those 5-star reviews. At the end of the month, I will do a drawing for one of those 5-star reviews to get a free RotoWare shirt. And we'll be doing that every month until the start of the season. So keep getting those 5-star reviews in. Really appreciate it. Follow Friends of Fantasy Benefits on Twitter at Fantasy Benefits. Sign up for TGFBI. TGFBI signups are live right now. They go through the end of the month. So if you want to get in TGFBI or TGFBI Satellite, do that ASAP because we are starting to run out of time. All right, let's talk some Mets because this is a fun and interesting team with a lot of star power and fantasy relevant players. Let's start with the catching situation there, which is a little weird. They did get rid of James McCann, trading him over to the Orioles. But they brought in Omar Narvaez. They still have Tomas Nido, and they have Francisco Alvarez. Chris, from a fantasy perspective, who do you want? And do you think that Alvarez is actually going to have a role to start the season on this team?
Yeah. So, and this is going to be kind of the first, and I like starting with the catchers here because this is going to be the first kind of entry into what the Mets are going to look like for fantasy. Because I think there are a lot of platoon splits that you're going to have to be very careful for. I think Omar Narvaez is going to get the lion's share of stuff, and then Nido is going to be kind of that backup catcher there. But let's be real: if you're drafting either of those guys in a fantasy league, you're probably hurting for catcher. They're both not going to really bring you anything offensively. They're mostly going to bring the best fantasy value to the Mets pitchers, which we'll talk about later. I think that's going to be interesting. Narvaez has some pop, but that was kind of a juiced ball kind of in 2019. He had, I think, 22 home runs. So I don't really see much from him there. Maybe tail end in a 2-catcher league, you're looking at Narvaez for something. But I even think that the platoon and the backstop is going to be too much to get any consistent at bats out of anyone. Alvarez, I think, is going to be your interesting guy, but even then, you're drafting someone that is kind of maybe going to do something this year. The Mets really need offense. And so they're going to probably lean on him to do some kind of lion's share weak side platoon for the DH side. So I think you're going to see a lot of at-bats against lefties, but are you really going to draft someone that's going to basically be a weak side platoon guy? I'm not totally sure. So I think Alvarez is probably the guy you go for those illustrious non-catcher catcher at bats. But ultimately, I think he's even going to lose a lot of at bats in the end anyways. So I'm not really sure who you'd go for here.
Dave, are you drafting any Mets catchers?
Yeah, the answer for me is that I'm not going for any of these guys. This is just a full fade for me. Narvaez and Nido, 0. I'm not seeing anything there to like. I mean, the StatCast metrics are putrid for Narvaez, and like Chris was saying, the juiced ball helped him a bit earlier, but I'm not seeing that come back. And it just looks like an ugly platoon situation. And with Alvarez, I think this guy's like a future superstar. I mean, he came up as a 20-year-old, but I just don't think he's ready. I mean, he's gonna be 21 this year. He had a relatively higher strikeout percentage in the minors, which usually portends to some struggles in the majors. So I definitely can see him coming up and struggling at first. And I just don't think that they're looking at him as at any point this season as their full-time starter. So I'm just not drafting him this year. But in the future, I definitely think the guy's going to be a stud.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I also want to remind people, depending on what format you play on, Alvarez isn't even going to be catcher eligible because he DH'd 3 games and caught 2 games at the major league level. Most sites go kind of, if you don't reach the minimum, kind of revert to whatever you played more. Now, we already know NFBC for sure he's UT only to start the season. And it's likely other sites will be like that too, but we won't know until they open for their fantasy year, which most of them won't do until after the Super Bowl. So.
Yeah. And I think even in that case, you're going to see him maybe get catcher eligibility, 3 months into the season or something like that. So
yeah, it's probably not worth rostering, especially in a single catcher league. You're obviously not rostering him. Even in a deep 2-catcher league, it's really difficult to roster a guy like that. Let's talk about Pete Alonso, who is coming off a massive year. And I think is a little overshadowed because of other guys in New York, namely on the Yankees, that had such a huge, massive year in terms of power. But Pete Alonso was fantastic. Dave, are you targeting Alonso at a draft price of about 21 or ADP of 21 since Christmas?
It's crazy. He's one of the few guys that we've seen in the league who has actually improved their contact metrics while not giving up any power, which is pretty incredible because, usually guys like him who come up with like a 25, 26% K rate, you don't see them cut it down to sub 20%, which he has. He was down to 19.9% in 2021 and then all the way down to 18.7% last year. And his contact rate has gone from 71.5% up to 78.6%. Really impressive. This guy is definitely just becoming a much better hitter. to the point where you can see him feasibly hitting, 270, maybe even 280. I mean, he hit 271 last year. With the new rules, could he hit 280 plus? It's possible. He's 50 homer power. He's in the middle of a really good lineup. I think the draft price is fair. Is he necessarily a target for me? I don't know. I feel like there's some guys like Jordan Alvarez who I know he's going earlier, but if I want to take that guy who's not going to give me any steals, it's probably going to be more of a guy like that who I think can hit 320, 330. Whereas Pete Alonso, while he's gotten much better, he's not quite at that level. But I definitely think he's a 4-category stud. I mean, at least 3-category stud with the upside and average to actually be better than average, which is more than most power hitters can say. So I think the price is totally fair. And shout out to our boy Johnny Legeza, who said that he was going to be better than Vlad last year, and he was dead on with that. And the guy is just getting better and better, and we'll see what he can do this year.
Chris, what about you? Are you in on Pete Alonso at the price?
Yeah, I do like the price. I think, like Dave said, it's a fair price. It is expensive, but I think it's a fair price. There's only a handful of guys that you can count for 40 home runs at least in a season nowadays, and you could almost say that you can count for 50 home runs out of this guy. So I think you can at least get 40 from him. He's, like Dave said, we're in the middle of a good lineup. So he's gonna get a great counting stats there. And one thing that I really liked, and what scares me kind of in like weekly leagues or anything, is Pete can sometimes be a touch streaky. Obviously that doesn't matter too much if you're not in a weekly league. But last year he really started kind of shortening his swing a little bit more when he was having struggles, and kind of hitting to all sides of the field. So I really think you're going to see a really good season out of him. I don't know how much to put into this, but he did just get that really nice arbitration settlement. And then maybe this is going to be kind of like a, hey, Mets, give me a long-term extension. This is going to be the year that I get. And also he's played at least 150 games each season he's been in the league, under obviously disregarding the shortened season. So that's pretty good from a second round pick. So I'm not mad at that. I'd take it.
Yeah, I'm not mad at it either. I actually really like Alonso. The hard part for me is just with your roster construction. There's so many first basemen this year. And it's something you kind of mentioned you guys before the draft with two different guys in Paul Goldschmidt and Nathaniel Lowe. I ended up taking them before I even got my second outfielder because there's just so much depth and there's so much value. And so it's really hard for me to want to pull the trigger that early on a first baseman unless I'm getting a guy who I think can be a 5-category stud. And unfortunately, Alonso, he runs a little bit, but just not enough to kind of be anything in the stolen base department. So it seems unlikely I end up with Alonso, but I don't have a problem with the pick. I actually, just kind of taking a look at where I have him projected in my projections, and he comes out to being Alonso. He comes out to being dun dun dun. Of course, I can't find it now. Yeah,
this is what Justin does when he's trying to stall. He goes dun, dun,
yeah,
dun.
Exactly. There we go. I have him as a top 25 player. So I'm 22nd. So ADP of 21. He's right there in terms of where I have him ranked. Versus ADP. So I think he's actually perfectly ranked. I just doubt I'll end up with him on very many teams.
Yeah,
maybe in an auction type setting would be a more likely place for me to end up with him if I'm going more stars than scrub stitch. Moving over to Jeff McNeill at second base. McNeill is again coming off of a brilliant season. Chris, do you think he can kind of repeat what he did? Because it feels like guys who are really batting average first can sometimes take a step back. Where are you at on Jeff McNeill?
Yeah, Jeff is always hard for me to really gauge. Because he's a very weird eye test versus numbers guy. Eye test wise, he seems to hit the crap out of the ball and put it and it always just seems to be atom balls, but he's not usually up there in like barrel velocity or anything like that. So it's really just eye test wise, I do think that kind of shift wise, he's going to benefit at least a little bit. And this is maybe not that big of a deal, but the Mets are pulling in the fences in right field a little bit. So I do think that you may see that kind of 10 home run number maybe reach the 12, 13 home run number, which, yes, that's not a crazy uplift there, but at least it gives you some power. And we are talking about second baseman there. So he does give you some good value, and he's looking at, I think I have ADP here around 180. So I think you're looking at a pretty valuable guy. I think he's going to get you that average still. I think he's going to hit there. The biggest issue for him is he's going to be hitting lower in the lineup. I think around his area, I have Cronenworth and Arias, and I feel like maybe I'd like Cronenworth more, but I think they're kind of that same tier. I think you're looking at a similar tier there. McNeill gets you some flexibility being second base and outfield too, but also I'm not really sure that you're drafting him for outfield play. So,
Dave, where are you at on McNeill?
Yeah, I mean, I think he's got the profile of a legit 300 hitter. He's got the elite contact. He doesn't strike out. 86% contact rate, 90% zone contact rate. But the StatCast measures are trash. I mean, the barrel rate is like career 3.5%. Hard hit rate is like 30%. He just doesn't have much power, and he doesn't really run either. So, I do think that if you need like a middle infielder if you're like desperately needing average, and you've got a middle infield slot open, I think he could make some sense. I think kind of depending, like Chris said, depending on where he hits in the lineup, he could give you some solid runs and RBI numbers, but you kind of know what you're getting with him, and there's very little upside here. So just a roster construction depending kind of guy.
Yeah, I just hate drafting empty batting average guys, and
Yeah.
I don't want to pay for last year's McNeill. I want to find this year's McNeill, right? I want to find the guy going outside of the top 300 picks that can give me good batting average if that's what I need when I get there. And so it just seems super unlike. I've never been a McNeill guy to begin with, so just because I don't like these kind of profiles.
Oh wow, I didn't realize he was going in like around pick 200. That's pretty high.
Yeah, and that to me is just. It seems it's probably going to be super rare that he even fits a construction that I've got going on when I get there. I mean, it's possible, but for the most part, I think it seems super unlikely that I end up with a guy like McNeill, just because I want the batting average to come with at least one other category, not kind of middling runs and RBIs, no power, and just a handful of steals. I need a little bit more than that.
Yeah. I think he's like a top tier middle infielder, and are you really going to pay that much for MI?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
agreed. A guy you will pay up for because he is really, really good at baseball is Francisco Lindor. I get the feeling though that there is a little bit of hate going Lindor's way, and he's being faded a little bit by the market. Dave, where are you at on Francisco Lindor?
I mean, I still like him. Anybody who contributes in all 5 categories, I love those guys, because at any point those guys can give you first round production because they're giving you every production in literally every category. He hasn't been the same player since 2019. I mean, he's got less contact, more swing and miss. He doesn't hit as many line drives anymore. The max EV is down, but the barrel and hard hit rates have been better than they've ever been the last few years. He was also negatively affected by the shift the most of any Met last year. He had 323 BABIP, which is not terrible, but his expected batting average on those pulled balls into the shift was 453. So while his average looked like he outperformed it a little bit last year, it wouldn't surprise me to see him with the new rules kind of be in that 270 area again. Even if he's not, I don't expect him to hit like 230 again like he did his first year in New York. That was a clear anomaly. Like I was all in on buying all the Lindor I could last year because I knew, that he was coming at a sale price that he shouldn't have been. So I if people are hating on him and whatnot, I'm happy to scoop up Lindor at a good price. I mean, he's still got plenty of speed. Speed score is still good last year, 5.6. Could he run more with the new rules? Absolutely. So we'll see what happens, but I'm a fan still.
What about you, Chris? Are you a fan?
Yeah, I don't want to be too much of a homer here, but I think he's going the fifth shortstop off the board right now, and I think he's better than that. That kind of puts him into the second tier, and I think he's a top tier shortstop. As Dave kind of said, you're looking at someone who's going to push you into pretty much all five of those categories, and he's a good lineup. It's going to have good counting stats, and I do think he's going to run more. I think he's going to be inclined to run more. The only thing that scares me about Lindor is that, as I kind of alluded to with some of the other picks, is that, the Mets obviously not getting Correa and not having that other big bat in the lineup. I always get kind of nervous about protection for the Alonsos and the Martes and the Lindors. I would have loved to have that little bit more protection down there to kind of pad Lindor a bit. But with that said, that's squabbling. I think Lindor is perfect where he's going for. I almost think he's a little undervalued there.
Yeah, I think he's kind of perfectly valued. And I don't mind him at the price at all. He's one of those guys where I feel like he is that last elite shortstop off the board. And typically I want to try to get one of those guys. I think he can help in all five categories. I do think the average will be fine. Probably 270 or even better. In 2023. So I like Francisco Lindor quite a bit. I think he's probably perfectly ranked in terms of being the fifth shortstop off the board, but I think he probably should be going a little bit higher than he is in terms of just overall ADP. I want to talk about third base because right now Eduardo Escobar is kind of penciled in as the guy. They do have Brett Baty, who was going to be kind of shit out of luck had they signed Correa, and Correa played every day there as well as Escobar would have been. But now with Correa not there, it looks like Escobar kind of going to be the guy to start. But Baty's the one that's interesting for fantasy. Chris, so how do you think this plays out throughout the year?
Yeah, I think it's going to be very interesting. And this is another platoon spot where I'm a little apprehensive with any of those guys. I think Baty is the one that's going to be the person that can potentially run away with this job if Escobar runs into the stretch that if Escobar starts the season like he did last year, where he just did nothing, for however many months, and then Escobar all of a sudden, lit the world on fire in September. I don't think the Mets are going to give him as much leeway as they did last year because they needed to. But I'm a little weary of this situation because I just think it's going to be another platoon split where you're seeing a lot of at bats for the guy that you want going to the other person. I also think that Luis Guillorme is going to get a lot of at bats in kind of this situation because the Mets love to get his glove in the infield, whether it be at second or third. And I think they're going to be a little bit more inclined to keep McNeill's bat in there, get McNeill his second base reps. And I think Guillorme is going to be at third. So I think you have a very crowded spot there. With that said, like I did say, Escobar had a really good September. Maybe he fixed his situation, and he's going to carry that in. I'm not totally sure. But it's going to be an interesting one. But again, this is that kind of platoon. Who gets the most at bats? Are you drafting these guys at the prices that they are for platoon guys? I'm not sure.
Dave, what about you?
Yeah, he's an interesting case because, he had a myriad of injuries last year. He had the dizziness and the headaches, and then he had the oblique injury, struggled for most of the year, like Chris said, and then he had the huge September, which kind of saved the season a bit. I think he had like 8 of his home runs in September. He was also negatively affected by the shift pretty much as Lindor was, where he had a 302 BABIP hitting into the shift, but a 431 expected batting average. So again, he could be a guy to benefit from that a bit. He did end up being the short side platoon in the second half to Guillorme for a while, who obviously is not a great hitter, but an elite defender. But the fact that they have Baty there too, ready to come up at any point. And Escobar also only has a 92 weighted runs created plus versus righties for his career. So definitely not a great sign when you're hitting righties below average. But the thing is, the guy comes at a price of he's going around 400 at his ADP. So I do think he's interesting. Like he's a guy who at that price, I'm willing to take a shot on him where I don't need him to produce, right? Like if he starts off hitting well, kind of like if he carries over a bit of his September hotness and they give him playing time, I think he's a great buy at 400, but definitely not a guy you want to rely on.
Yeah, I'm probably staying away from the situation entirely. I'll take some, calculated gambles on Baty especially if he looks good in spring training, because one thing about the Mets, which is different than almost every other team in baseball, is they don't give a shit about contracts now. So like they're going to give the job to the guy they think makes that team the best. And we've seen that with other players in the last couple of years, namely Robinson Cano, right? Where Cano had the big contract. They wanted him to get the job, but ultimately once he, proved he wasn't going to be useful for that team, they just ate the rest of that money. If Escobar is the best out of that group, then he's going to get the job. If Baty's the best out of the group, I think he can get the job. He's one to me that's really interesting because his power plays, once he's playing every day at the major league level. He's, legit 30 home run plus bat at some point in his career, and maybe even early in his career if he gets the opportunity. The hard part right now is I don't know that there's anybody that stands above the rest yet. I think Baty has the most talent at this point in their careers where he could get that job full-fledged over Escobar, but this just smells like a really frustrating platoon situation that I probably don't want to deal with in most fantasy leagues.
Yeah.
Do we care at all about a guy like Daniel Vogelbach, who's probably a strong side platoon there, Dave?
Yeah, I mean he's not a guy I'll draft unless I see their early schedule and they're facing a bunch of righties in the first couple weeks. But he's definitely a guy who you can look to stream when they're facing 5+ righties in a given week, especially if they're weaker righties. But he looks like he'll be in a straight platoon with Darin Ruf facing all the lefties. Who Ruf is so good against lefties. I mean he just mashes them. So anytime they're facing even 4 lefties in a week, I would pick up Ruf to stream him. But Vogelbach, he's going to the Mets. He did play there a little bit last year, but their park factors are not much better there than anywhere else he's been in his career. So I don't expect he's got pretty stable power metrics. He doesn't strike out too much for a power hitter and everything. Like he's solid for power, but he's basically just a streamer.
What about you, Chris?
Yeah, nothing really much to add. He's gonna hit home runs. He's gonna walk. If you have a weird league where you're only drafting really big guys, he's probably top of the list there. But for a normal league, no, you're probably not drafting him. Like Dave said, if he gets hot, he's a really good guy to watch. But that's really all.
Dave and I could play in that kind of league, really big guys only. So, yeah, I
don't know if we're Vogelbach big, but yeah.
I think you're probably Vogelbach big. Maybe. You're a big, tall guy.
How tall is he?
He's probably like 6'3".
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah. I got their chart up, so.
I could probably bring him up real quick and figure it out.
He's listed at 6 feet 270. So.
Oh well, he is definitely big, not in the tall way though.
I mean, yeah, I've got. I mean, he weighs about the same as me, but I've got 5 inches on him. So
yeah, there you go. All right, let's move into the outfield. Get some more interesting guys. Starling Marte is a former 2nd-round pick. Dealt with some injuries last year. Chris, do you think this is a bounce back year for Starling Marte?
Yeah, I mean, I think when he was on the field, he had, he was one of the guys that would give us consistency. And he's really funny because he looks like he hits a lot of home runs, but he really doesn't. He gets you in kind of that 18-ish home runs, but I think that he's going to be the guy that's going to benefit from these rule changes. I think you're going to see 18-ish home runs or so, batting near that 300 mark, probably in that 280s or so, with probably 20-ish stolen bases. And I think that's really good for where you're looking at. The biggest problem, though, I think, is that in his area are guys like George Springer, Eloy Jimenez, Teoscar Hernandez, and I'm kind of I don't know, liking those guys a little bit more. You know, I think Marte gives you that little bit of fear with that injury concern. And I think Marte is probably one of the more rounded players. I think probably Springer's a little bit more rounded, but Springer has the same kind of flags as Marte does.
I'd
But
say
I'm
more,
not
yeah.
sure. Sorry?
Oh, sorry. I was just saying. I would say Springer has more red flags than Marte. I mean, that dude just cannot stay healthy. I mean, Marte misses some time here and there, but I think more the concern with Marte is his age. But I agree with a lot of what you said. I think the power is right on. You know, he'll probably hit about 18 homers somewhere in that range. And he's a legit 280, 290, possibly even 300 hitter. I don't think he's the sexy option for where he goes. I mean, like you were mentioning, some other guys going around him. Corbin Carroll goes a little bit ahead of him. Teoscar goes a little bit ahead of him. Eloy. These guys are all sexier. But I mean, Starling Marte, if his age doesn't hold him back, I mean, the problem with him was he got caught a bunch last year. He had 9 caught stealing out of 27 attempts. He only 18 steals, but projections have him down for, 27, 29 steals. He could easily steal 30 plus again. And for where he goes, going around pick 80, I think he's kind of a bargain there. And I think he's a guy who can fall in drafts because I think he's the unsexy option. I think people are overlooking him because, he's coming off of a bad year. He's a little older, and most of his a lot of his value is derived from speed, but he's also a good contact hitter, and he's not a negative in the power category either. So this is another 5 category contributor who you can get at pick 80. I think he's interesting.
Yeah, I don't quite 100% understand why the market is fading him as much as they should, or as much as they are. Marte has been a second, third round, fourth round pick pretty much every year of his career. Health is the only thing that is the red flag, right? But you were talking about some of the guys going around in his area. They all have red flags. The entire outfield in general this year has red flags. You get past like the top 10 outfielders, and it is just red flag after red flag. And so like I agree with Dave. I think Starling Marte is an absolute bargain right now at the draft table. I'm going to have a ton of shares of Marte if he continues to be going outside the top 50 picks, much less the top 75 or top 80. I just think he's an absolute steal right now. And I've always been a Marte guy, so maybe I'm a little bit biased, but I don't understand why people are fading him and then going after those guys like Adolis Garcia, who's got huge red flags. Luis Robert, who has not been able to stay on the field at all. Like, I love Luis Robert, and I actually like him at his price this year, but like he isn't any better than Starling Marte. I think it's just youth at this point is the only difference. So, I'm a big fan of Starling Marte this year, especially at the price. Brandon Nimmo, another guy who he got a big contract to come back to the Mets, but he's another guy who he's pretty good when he's on the field. The problem is he's not always on the field. Chris, where are you at on Brandon Nimmo this year?
Yeah, I mean, I think he's another one where we're talking about where he's going in drafts, and I really like it. I have kind of in the 150s range right now. And I think anyone that is going to be at the top of a lineup that is as good as the Mets lineup is, that's a pretty good spot to be in. You're going to get your runs there. And I think he's going to be someone that's going to run a little bit more. He hasn't run much lately, but he does have speed. He has kind of that weird speed there. And I think he might be a little bit more inclined to steal some bases. I think it's really been fun as just from a baseball perspective. It has been a lot of fun to watch Nimmo play. He used to be one of the worst defensively metric outfielders in the history of history. And then he's actually become like a pretty good center fielder. I think, Nimmo's going to see all that center field play. As long as he stays on the field, he's going to be good. He played 151 games last year. It was only his second time going over 100. So assuming he stays healthy, I think you're going to see that 15 home runs and be the leadoff hitter in a good offense and be going around that 150 range. I like that, so I'm kind of in on Nimmo here, but
are you in on Nimmo, Dave?
Yeah, this will be the first time we disagree here. I just can't do it. I mean, basically, you're paying for him at his high water mark, coming off of like the first time he's ever really stayed healthy. I mean, 2020 he was healthy in a shortened season, but again, who knows if it would have been a normal season. 2018 he played 140 games, so it, not bad. But he's been in the league since 2016, and this is the first time he's had 150 games. And even anywhere close to it outside of those 2 years, really, he hasn't been close. And he's kind of like, to me, he's basically McNeill, but with less average and slightly more power. I'm not looking to pay for guys coming off of a healthy year who have proven consistently that they just can't stay healthy. His Statcast metrics are kind of meh, and he's got a high ground ball rate. He's good for he's not someone who hurts you really anywhere other than he doesn't provide much speed, but it's just he's not the kind of guy that I invest in.
Yeah, the problem with Nimmo is the price right now. So you're going to pick 182 in Draft Champions League since Christmas, which like isn't in itself like a really bad price necessarily, but like almost all the guys going after him, I think I'd rather have. Like I don't even like Oscar Gonzalez, and I think I'd rather have Oscar Gonzalez just because of the power upside.
Andrew Benintendi is going to pick 220. I mean, I would take Benintendi over Nimmo straight up.
I think they're the same player, with Benintendi likely probably having better health. Cody Bellinger, I hate Cody Bellinger, and I would take that upside over Brandon Nimmo. Lars Nootbaar, I mean, it's going to be everybody's favorite pick over a guy like Brandon Nimmo this year. But like even like an Alex Verdugo, or give me the upside on Riley Green, or Gavin Lux for sure. Like there's just so many guys going behind him that I think I'd rather have. Nimmo played more plate appearances last year than he had the previous 2 seasons combined. And I know that includes 2020. So go back to 2019, and at 2019 to 2021 still had more plate appearances last year. The dude just struggles to stay on the field. This was a contract year explosion, but even in a contract year explosion, he had 16 home runs and 3 stolen bases. Like that, I don't care about that. Like, unfortunately for fantasy. So, I'm probably passing. Dave, do you care about Mark Canha for fantasy?
Not really. But I mean, the Statcast metrics are trash, but the Mets park is a big upgrade for power compared to Oakland. He probably still won't reach 20 homers, but I do expect the power uptick there to maybe 18 homers if he plays every day. Not that I expect him to play every day, but I think his average will go down a bit. I think he's more of a 250 hitter than like a 265 hitter. There's nothing really there that excites me in his profile. He goes 345, so if you're looking for a guy to just kind of who will get at bats at that point in the draft, I think the price is fair. There's just not much there to excite me really.
What about you, Chris? Do you care about Mark Canha?
Yeah, I mean, I think price is fair. I think what I think is most interesting is left field is probably one of the spots where if the Mets are going to make a move, they're going to be looking to get better there, either there or third base. So that's obviously going to hurt Canha. I think Canha kind of struggles with, he's going to be in the same situation where he's going to lose some at bats to other guys, whether it be McNeill shifting over to kind of have McNeill play left and then have Guillorme's glove in the field. So Canha's going to lose some at bats there. Canha is a streaky kind of guy. When he's hot, he's really good. So he's kind of another one where I would kind of keep my eye out. He actually has a weird split where he's one of those that he doesn't really hit lefties very well, which is fun. So he's one of those where I'd kind of just really play the hot hand on him. He's being drafted at around the Yoshida area, Ozuna area, Brantley tier. I think it's fair. It's really just a playing time situation. I'm not totally sure. I think he's going to be a platoon guy, and I don't know. It's scary. I think where he is, it's fine. And if you need the help at the back end of your outfield, sure, that's good. But he's not like fun.
Yeah, I think he's a guy you kind of just rotate it in and off your roster, the back end of your roster.
Yeah.
Like I said, when he's hot, then you can play him, and then he cools down or loses playing time, you just jettison him off your team for the next guy. Typically I'm looking for a little bit more upside than that at that point in the draft, but like I don't think there's anything necessarily wrong with him. I think he's meh. He's fine, right? Khalil Lee was a guy that people were excited about as a prospect for a long time. He's never panned into anything at the major league level. It looks like he's the fourth outfielder right now. Chris, is he ever going to live up to the hype that he once had?
I don't know. I think he'd have to learn how to hit a baseball. I'm being mean there. His first major stint in the majors, he struck out about 72% of his at bats.
Is that bad?
I don't know. And then in 2022, he did improve on those numbers. He actually struck out 0% of his at bats, but he only had 2 at bats. So I don't know. I mean, in AAA, he's shown he hits homers. He runs really well. So I think he's a really fun, and he kind of has that profile of the guy that, I want him to succeed. I want to see him well, but he just hasn't shown it in the majors. I think the Mets are honestly too good of a team to kind of trust in a player like Khalil Lee. I think they're going to probably get better in left field. And honestly, I almost put, as kind of a Mets fan, seeing how they operate, I kind of put McNeill as that fourth outfielder for the Mets. So I just don't see Khalil Lee. He's 25, so maybe this is the Trout sickness, but it seems like he's got to kind of do a put up or shut up type thing. And I just don't think he's going to do it with the Mets. So,
Dave,
I got nothing. I'm not interested.
Yeah, I'm right there with you guys. He's got power in the bat. He has some speed, not as much speed as like the 53 stolen bases he had at one stop in the minor leagues in 2019 with the Royals, kind of speed. But like he has enough speed to like steal a few bases, but you cannot fake contact skills, and that is what he lacks. And unfortunately, he is the epitome of a quad A player. He probably shouldn't be in the majors, but he probably is going to be too good for the minors. So, I don't think there's much of a future. Let's move into the starting rotation, where we have 2 studs at the top. Both are kind of very similar, right? You got Max Scherzer in his second year with the Mets, Justin Verlander in his first year with the Mets. Both are first ballot Hall of Fame pitchers who are still very, very good at throwing the ball, but both are older. Both have had injury issues the last few years. Chris, do you have a preference? Would you draft both? Would you stay away?
Oh, I hate to do this. I'm staying away, far away. I'm definitely, now maybe says more about my fantasy prowess, I guess. I'm not a draft a stud pitcher. I live in those, Taiwan Walkers and stuff like that. I love that area of pitchers. And I get very afraid spending as high of a pick as you're going to spend on a Verlander or a Scherzer, especially those 2 guys. Who knows the troubles that they're going to have staying on the field. I'm hoping not, but you never know. Obviously, Justin Verlander is coming off of an amazing season last year. But again, it's the second season of Tommy John at his age. Scherzer had some injury issues last year, and the Mets are really kind of, touch and go with Scherzer, and they're really listening to him. And Scherzer's kind of lost that, I don't know. I don't want to that rabid dog that he used to have, So I think that Scherzer is more willing to listen to his own body, which is great for him. But I think he's going to not be on the field maybe as much. He's going to maybe miss 1 or 2 starts here or there. I just struggle at the price that they are. I think they're going to be great, honestly. I think they're going to be good pitchers and they're going to play well. But just the price is scary.
Dave, where are you at on these guys? I know you have faded older injury-prone pitchers in the past. So are you fading both of these guys this year?
I won't say I'm fading them, but, definitely, especially with Verlander. I mean, look, the guy's proven me wrong, most of the years. I mean, I correctly avoided him in 2020, but, a lot of the years before that, looked like he was going to be, after 2017 when he had that, 4.27 xERA, 4.05 SIERA. I was like, okay, here's going to start the downfall. Then he went to Houston and resurrected his career again, and all of a sudden, two dominant years before Tommy John, then coming back last year, I'm like, okay, he's 39 coming off of Tommy John. He's not going to be good, but he was. But when you look underneath the hood a bit, there's a lot of warning signs with Verlander. The velocity is still there, but the swing and miss on all of his pitches is just way, way down. His K rate is way down. He was typically like, in those two dominant years in Houston in 2018, 2019, he was striking out over 12 batters per nine. He was down under 10 last year. Now, still good. Control's great. I still expect him to be a good pitcher. I just don't want him where he's going. And frankly, I would take Scherzer over him. Scherzer, you can see a little bit of the degradation in skills there as well, but it's much less pronounced than it looks like in Verlander. He's a couple years younger. But both these guys are going to be great with whip, and I expect good ERAs for both. Definitely, pretty big injury risks, but I'm more concerned with Verlander than I am with Scherzer. But I don't know that I go to either of them at that point in the draft. I just think I'd rather take my shots at pitching later.
Yeah, I'm totally fine with where they're going. I actually think they both represent pretty decent values. Now, those values come with risk, right? They're older. They both have dealt with injury issues. But I mean, has there been? I'm going to take Verlander out of the equation right now and just talk about Scherzer. Like, has there been a guy as dominant as he has been for as long as been? And I know last year represented the least amount of innings he's thrown in a single season, but I also think that you can probably book him for like 160, 170 innings of just elite work. And when I put that into my projections, he's like a top 10 pitcher, no problem. I think Verlander is a guy I'm a little bit more worried about, especially because he seemed to like really kind of struggle and break down towards the end of the season. But even that, like I just, especially if I'm getting them as my SP2 in a 15-team league, like I've got no problem pairing one of them as with an ace and feeling pretty good about the start of my rotation. I think I'm going to have a lot of Verlander, a lot of Scherzer and some Verlander this year for sure. Moving on in the rotation, you start getting into some more question marks. You've got Kodai Senga, who signed, the big contract from Japan. It's hard to know exactly what he's going to be, especially because it doesn't even sound like the Mets know exactly what he's going to be to start the season. Chris, where are you at on Kodai Senga?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm in, but it's all question marks. I think I'm in and more of like this could be fun, situation. I think, and maybe I'm wrong with where I have him, but I have him around kind of the Skubal, Marquez, Kluber range, and I'm down with that. I think that's an interesting range. That's a good range to play around with. That's your take a shot range, and I think this is why not take a shot here. The good news is, I think for Kodai is that they usually tell you to kind of, even though it's kind of funny because you think with Japan, it's a lot of breaking stuff. They usually try to tell you to fade breaking stuff because that's the stuff that is a little bit scary to predict when it comes over to the States. But he does throw hard. He sits on 96. He can hit 100. That usually translates from Japan. So I think, velocity wise, I think he's going to be good. His control rates have gotten better as he's been in the Japan league there. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's a shot in the dark, but it's a shot in the dark I'd be willing to make where he's going. Dave, what about you?
I mean, I don't know anything about imports really. I just listen to what other people say about them. They're always a crapshoot to see what translates, especially in year one. I guess for me, a lot of that is interesting. And I think looking at where he goes, I think he's going around the right time because he's going after, a lot of the guys that I like, the known quantities that I would want over him. And then I think he starts going kind of where it starts to get slightly sketchier. So I do think about guys like maybe Edward Cabrera and Grayson Rodriguez that I probably am higher on than Senga, but I think where he goes is probably fair. I just don't know that I'll ever be the guy to take that shot on him just because I don't know what I'm getting really.
I got him in some early drafts before he was posted. because I got him extremely cheap. And that was about 150 picks lower than where he's going right now. He's currently going at pick 183, and he's going right around guys like Charlie Morton, Drew Rasmussen, Tony Gonsolin, Brady Singer, who I love, John Gray, who I love, Grayson Rodriguez, who I'm really, really excited about, Edward Cabrera, Lance McCullers, Reed Detmers, Andrew Heaney, who I love. Like, I just can't imagine taking him over any of those guys. And so I feel like I got a couple early shares, and I'm very happy with those shares. I probably am not going to get any more, except for maybe in like a dynasty league or something like that. I really want to see what he looks like. And the problem is, if he comes over and in spring training, he's just blowing 96 pass guys and making people look foolish at the plate, he's going to jump up another 50, 60 picks, and then he'll be way out of my price range. So it seems unlikely at the current price that I'm going to buy in, much less at any sort of elevated price.
Yeah, definitely. Like I said, I think he's the shot in the dark pick, and
maybe. Let's talk about Carlos Carrasco, Jose Quintana, David Peterson, Tylor Megill. Dave, any of these guys targets for you this year, or because this is going to become a very confusing back end of the rotation in New York, I think.
Yeah, and I think with a lot of their pitchers are old and have injury issues, I definitely think we're going to see a good amount of David Peterson, Tylor Megill, where both of those guys are guys that I'm really, really into. Like those are guys that I'll just be waiting to pick up. I won't draft them in a regular league. Now in DCs, both of those guys are targets for me and now granted, this is assuming Megill actually, they keep him as a starter. I don't know if they're going to put him in the pen or if they're going to have him start in the minors. But I mean, the guy has elite stuff. And I've also been a huge David Peterson guy for years. And, I believe it's his slider that he gets a shit ton of swinging strikes with. Yeah. I mean, he took it to a whole new level last year. Like it is elite. So yeah, those two guys in DCs are big time targets for me. Cause I do think they're going to need starters coming up. Quintana is coming off of super lucky, really good surface stat year. But again, doesn't really strike guys out. The Sierra says he was more like a 4 ERA pitcher than a 3 ERA pitcher. But I think he's a decent filler and he's on a good team to give you a good shot at wins. I don't hate Quintana, and I don't think that the price is prohibitive either. From what I remember, like 325. There's some other guys going around there that I like a little bit more, but he's a guy who would be in consideration. He's also a guy who I think is going to fall. I don't think anybody's really excited to draft Jose Quintana, but he's just a solid guy who gives you length. Now the big target for me is going to be Carlos Carrasco. I fade older injury-prone pitchers, but when we're talking about a guy going around pick 300 and he's got two pitches, his slider and his changeup, that get 20% swinging strikes, like that's awesome. He's kind of like a Bieber light in that he has a bad fastball, but multiple good off-speed pitches to get the swing strikes on. And he was as a Guardians fan, he was a huge part of our success, and I love the guy. Like he was just such a great guy, and he did great things for us. But I kind of faded him a lot in fantasy because his price was always prohibitive, where I knew that the injury track record was a problem with him. But now that I can get him around pick 300, like I'm way in on that. So Carrasco's the big target here.
Chris, what about you? Any of these guys interest you for fantasy?
Yeah, nothing new to add here. I think, Carrasco is probably the guy that gives you some consistency there as long as he stays on the field. I think he's going to be the best pitcher out of all of the ones that we said. Quintana's interesting. I think Quintana's a better real-life pitcher than he is a fantasy pitcher, so I'm probably not looking towards him. I think Megill is very, very interesting, but he looked like the second coming of DeGrom until he got hurt, and then everything just kind of wheels fell off there. You bring up an interesting point. They might actually keep him towards the bullpen, just to keep him in major league reps and stuff. David Peterson, you're going to see a lot. He has great strikeout potential, but that strikeout potential comes with control issues. And I've seen him blow up a lot of times against teams like the Nationals and stuff. So that's always scary for me. Your other guys that are going to get starts, Joey Lucchesi, Sure. Eliezer Hernandez. Sure. No kind of down the league 40-man roster guys are really that interesting to me for the Mets and starting. So, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, for me, it's Carlos Carrasco and David Peterson. I mean, Quintana's whatever. I want to find the next Quintana, which is a guy going outside the top 500 that is just like a workhorse for a team and kind of finds, some fountain of youth kind of bullshit that Quintana found last year. I don't want to pay for last year's Quintana.
Yeah, I did draft him on a bunch of DCs where you're just looking for innings. A guy like him, I'm like, hey,
he turned into your SP 4 and 5 in some leagues.
Yeah,
like it's just
exactly.
You're looking for the next one of those. You don't want to pay for last year's, even though, like you said, the price isn't bad or anything. Carrasco is super, super interesting to me. Because this was his best home run rate in 4 years, his best walk rate in 3 years. He threw the most amount of innings he's thrown in the last 4 years. This looked in many ways like vintage Carrasco, and nobody is talking about it. Like the price is not off the map. And it's because he's older, he's injury prone. He's 35 this year, and
I think 36, right?
He's going to be 36 by opening day. I think Carrasco is super, super interesting as a guy that people are just overlooking. And I'm totally fine with the price. For me, David Peterson is super, super interesting, especially down the stretch. He looked really, really good. The command and control looked better than it did earlier on in the season. The problem is the bringing in of other guys has made it, like Verlander and Quintana has kind of taken away a spot. Now, this rotation has a lot of injury risk, as we've talked about, so I think he will find his spots in the rotation, but you're probably going to have to wait a little bit if all these guys are starting off the season healthy. Megill, I love the straight skills, but I am just petrified of the health. And I do think because he threw so few innings last year that it's likely he's destined for a bullpen spot until they can either stretch him out or they really, really need him because other guys are getting injured. So I'm probably not drafting Megill in any formats at this point. So Edwin Diaz is the best closer in the game right now with the best walkout song, which means something to me in fantasy because I love hearing those trumpets. It gets me jazzed. Chris, are you drafting him at his really high ADP? And if he were to go down, who do you think would be next man up?
Yeah. So look, like you just said, best, he might be one of the best kind of skill pitchers we've ever seen. I'm not touching him. I'm a Sagnoff, a Rasball kind of saves ain't got no face type person. So I never go after guys like this. I think that again, if you're one of the people that love going closers high, he's probably the best of the best, and he's going to get you a million strikeouts. He's going to get you saves. I think if he does end up getting hurt, the Mets have a lot of really interesting pieces that they could go to with Ottavino, Robertson, even Brooks Raley kind of down the line. Even Drew Smith could get some saves there. But I think David Robertson's going to be the kind of handcuff in this situation. But I don't know that you're drafting a Robertson for a handcuff with the Diaz as good as he is. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. But
Dave?
Yeah, I mean, in the past when the closers have been really like there's been only a couple of good closer situations, I was never opposed to drafting closers early. This year, I feel like there's some better closer situations later than before where I don't feel the need to jump up and draft a guy like Diaz. I mean, if it's at the right point, it's possible that I'll get him. Definitely in like some Yahoo leagues where there's everyday changes where the closers have more value. I could see drafting him early, but in a typical league, probably not, despite the fact that he's just really, really good. I don't think it matters who his backup is unless you just like handcuffing guys because, I mean, he's healthy. There's no way they're removing him from the role, even if he struggles. So, I'm not really interested in holding on to his backup, but it's definitely David Robertson. I mean, he closed last year. They gave him $10 million on a 1-year contract. I know they've got Ottavino there too, but Ottavino's always been the setup man, never been the closer really. So it's definitely Robertson after him. But you can draft Robertson and just throw him in there where you need him, but I'm not expecting him to get many saves at all.
Yeah, I think the only place I'm drafting a guy like Robertson is in a DC just to like ensure if something were to happen, I'd have, if I drafted Diaz
If you drafted
already.
Diaz,
Yeah. Other than that, I'm NL only is probably the only other place you're drafting a David Robertson. I have no problem taking Edwin Diaz in the second round. I really don't, especially if I'm kind of towards the if I have an early pick, and so that means I'm drafting late in the second round of a 15-teamer. And Diaz falls to me, I'll probably take him just because I think he is that good, and I don't know what kind of saves options are going to make it back around to me like on the 3-4 turn. That being said, like I would, I'm in a draft right now. I had the 8th pick. In the second round, I had my shot at Diaz or Clase, and I went JJ Realmuto. Like I'm gonna probably more often than not take the best hitter available on the board or a top tier starting pitcher before that. But I don't have an issue with it. I've never shied away from drafting an early closer in deeper formats. But like Chris saying, in your standard 10 and 12 team leagues, there's no way I'm taking closer that early. I will wait and grab my saves a little bit later. And I have no problem doing that even in deeper leagues. In this current draft I'm in, I didn't draft a closer, I think, until the 7th round. So I waited quite a while and ended up with David Bednar and Alexis Diaz, and I'm fine with that. So, all right. That does it for this episode. Chris, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, no, thank you again. This was a lot of fun. I'm glad you all got to listen to my Mets. Hey, if you want to join Mets Twitter, we are the most probably the most insufferable fan base to listen to. But hey,
there's a lot of those out there.
Yeah, I guess that's fair. But one thing that's great is no one hates the Mets like we hate the Mets.
That's true.
So that's a beautiful piece of it. So we're a fun group there. So yeah, no, thank you for having me. I had a lot of fun.
Pleasure to have you, Chris.
Yeah, it was fantastic. I'll remind everybody again where you can reach the social media and then plug everything you guys are doing.
Yeah, so please hit us up at Ball5Pod. Again, that's 5 spelt out. And we are on Spotify and Apple at the same name there. And like I said, if you want general baseball, some humor mixed in, and all that, we talk about a lot of guys. Remember those guys, where it's one-time all-star people, and we riff for about 15 minutes on just random people. I chose Tim Wakefield for my guy last week, so so there's that. We just kind of talk about that for a little bit and then have some fun. So
awesome. Definitely go follow Chris on the Twitter machine, and also make sure you are subscribed. Go give him a 5-star review. Steal your mom's phone and give him a 5-star review from your mom's phone.
I'm going to. So
yeah, exactly. There you go. Dave, where can we reach? What are you working on?
Yeah, run D McD on Twitter. Add that D, and Jake. Of course, rescheduled our taping of High Stakes Heat. So,
I know, because I was all like on Thursday morning. I'm all like refreshing my podcast player.
I know. He had laryngitis or something. It's Jake, so who knows with this nonsense? But no, I'm just kidding. We are planning on doing it either tomorrow or the day after. So we'll see, though. Been saying that since last March. So, but be on the lookout. No, we'll do it. We will do it. It'll happen. So.
You can follow me on Twitter at Justin Mason FWFB. Follow Friends of Fantasy Benefits on Twitter at Fantasy Benefits. Email me or the show, friendsoffantasybenefits@gmail.com. Get those 5-star reviews in so you can win yourself a free RotoWire shirt. Going to be giving away one of those each month until the start of the season. I'm writing daily at Fangraphs right now. I'm almost done with my projections. I just finished third base and shortstop last night. As soon as we're done here, I will probably really start knocking out most of my outfielders. And so hopefully my full projections, full ranks, which are available over on my Patreon, will be available by the end of next weekend. What else do I have going on? I've got other stuff. 30 team previews in 30 days. This is the 18th one of these that I've done. I'm going to do the 19th one tonight, talking Mariners with Sam Wershing, who was on the pod recently. So definitely check that out the day after this one posts. So that will do it for this episode. For Dave, Chris, and myself, thank you for listening. Have a fantastic baseball offseason.